So, what I would tell you to do, just real quick before I start this very first question, would be if you could factor something in either fraction, if you could factor it, especially the denominator, try to do that first because it might save you a little bit of time. Okay, so I can't do any factoring on that first one. On the second fraction, can anybody tell me how I could factor on the bottom of that second fraction? What would you write for x squared minus 9? You can factor that. That's a difference of squares.
X minus 9 and x plus 9.
Close. If it's x squared minus 9. If it was 81, it would be that.
3. Sorry.
There you go. You're fine. I knew you knew. Okay, so x minus 3, x plus 3. Okay, now, once I did that real quick there, right? Do you notice I already have an x minus 3 over here? So if I were going to try and create a common denominator, literally all I need on this one is an x plus 3, right? Because I already have the x minus 3. But I needed to put that in factored form to be able to see that. All right, now, if you do that, my denominators match, right? X minus 3, x plus 3, just don't even worry about it. If the bottoms are the same, the tops have to be equal to each other. On this side, x plus 3 times 1 would just be x plus 3. The other side is 4x, and that's the equation you would have to solve. So literally just going to do just a quick, I would move this x to the other side, so I'd have 4x minus x would give me 3x, and then we're just going to divide by 3, and x would be 1. And then just real quick, check your answer. Make sure it doesn't make a denominator 0. So if I had gotten 3 or negative 3 as an answer, we would be in bad shape, but this is just positive 1. So as long as it's not 3 or negative 3, you're good to go. Does anybody have a question? Okay, this next one I think looks really tricky, but it's not bad. So I have a 3 and an a plus 8, so that's already in factored form. Then I literally just have the number 2, and then I have a 5a over a plus 8. What would you use as a common denominator here?
Could you have it just be a plus 8, so you divide the first one with 6 divided by 3, and get 2 on top?
Oh, I didn't even notice that. Yes, you could. All right, so look at this. Look at that. All right, a plus 8. He reduced that. I didn't even think about that. Sweet. All right, and then here's what I'm going to do. Let me write this 2, right? You can take any number and turn it into a fraction or any variable. Just put it over 1, and I'm going to put that common denominator there. Perfect. Should have Carter come up here and teach today probably, because I totally didn't even notice that. All right, so 5a plus 8. Now, the only thing I would need to get a common denominator going here, right in the middle, this would need an a plus 8 on the top and bottom, right? If I can make the denominators match, which I do if I take and multiply top and bottom by a plus 8 in the middle there, you just cross this out, don't even worry about it, and just work with the top. So the top of the first fraction would literally just be 2. And then in the middle there, I have to do like a little distributive property because I have to multiply that a plus 8 times 2. The other side we didn't have to manipulate because that already had that a plus 8 as the denominator. So I'm just going to do a little distribute. Don't add those 2's together. I know someone did that. Don't do that. You got to do the distributive property first there. So this would be 2a plus 16. So I've got 2a plus 18 here on that left side if I combine my like terms. Now, totally up to you. If it was me, the least amount of work is just to move this 2a to the other side. So I'm going to have 18 equals 3a. So what would a be equal to? 6. And then if you want to look back to the original problem, the only answer that would have caused me an issue would have been if it was negative 8, which it's not, so we're good to go. That should be my answer. Is anybody having a question? Okay, let me scooch this up. Now, these guys each have kind of 3 different fractions in them, but if you do a little bit of factoring before you start the problem, this is going to save you a ton of time. All right, there's no factoring that you are going to do on either of these first 2 fractions. There's nothing to factor. Just no greatest common factor, no quadratic, nothing. But I can factor the denominator of that very far fraction all the way to the right there. How could I factor x squared minus 121? It is a difference of squares. Mars, what do you think?
Just gonna say square.
Yeah, it is. Okay, it is. This is a square root. Just one of them is x plus 11, one of them is x minus 11. Done. Okay, now, here's the deal. This is weird. You have to multiply both of these fractions to make these match up, but you don't have to do a bunch of work. Okay, so this one has an x minus 11, but not the x plus. So I would need x plus 11, top and bottom here. The second fraction has the x plus 11, but not the x minus 11. So this would need x minus 11, top and bottom, to make it match. Okay, now every single one of these, and they don't have to come in a particular order, but both, or all three denominators have an x minus 11 and an x plus 11. So we're just going to cross that right on out. Now, this guy here, you got to do a little distributive property. All right, so 5 times x would be 5x, 5 times 11 is 55. Now, the one in the middle, you're just distributing a 1. So like 1 times x is just 1x. 1 times negative 11 would just be negative 11. That's not going to change anything because I'm just multiplying by 1. And then the other side, we didn't have to get a common denominator or do anything for that because it already had that denominator, so it's just the 8. There's nothing to do over there. Combine your like terms here. You got 6x's plus what? 44 equals 8. And then all I got to do is subtract 44 from both sides. Can someone tell me what that is? Negative 30. Oh, excellent. Okay, now I'm going to divide by 6. So my answer is going to be a nice number, right? Negative 6. Okay, now, as long, my denominator's in the original problem, right? 11 and negative 11 would cause me a problem. As long as that's not my answer, we're good to go. Negative 6 is my answer, so that's it. We're done. Okay, let me try one more. This is pretty similar to the question we just did. Once you get going on it. Sorry, let me just make this bigger so you guys can I hope you can read it from there. So you can see it. Okay, now tell me if I've got x squared minus 7x plus 12. What two numbers would multiply to get you 12 but add to get you negative 7? Perfect, negative 4, negative 3. So the factored form of that quadratic, x minus 4, x minus 3. Now, what you're going to notice, and this happens a lot of times in these questions, they set them up in this format. Like one of the factors is in one of the denominators, and the other factors in the other denominators. It's super similar to the question we just did. It's just the factoring's a tiny bit different. Now, all I'm going to do, I'm going to need to get a common denominator. This one needs an x minus 4. And this one needs an x minus 3. All right, then each one of those, at some point in the denominator, it has an x minus 4 times an x minus 3. If you can make that happen, just cross that denominator on out. Don't even worry about it. Until the very end, you got to make sure if our answer was 4 or 3, then we'd have to worry about that, but not for the moment. So I'm just going to take the top. So 5 plus... Now, I'm just going to distribute as I go here. So this is plus 2 times this x minus 4. So 2 times x would give you 2x. 2 times negative 4 would give you negative 8. And then on the other side, where I got the equal sign there, we're going to distribute 5. So 5 times x is 5x. 5 times negative 3 would be negative 15. Okay, now totally up to you. If it's me, I'm just going to simplify this side just a tiny, tiny bit. 5 minus 8 on that left side is going to be negative 3. So I got 2x minus 3 and 5x minus 15. Okay, from there, what do we want to do? Because there's different ways you could do it. It's totally up to you. Add 3, all right. So I got 2x equals 5x minus 12. What do you want to do next? Subtract the 5. All right, so I got negative 3x equals negative 12. So what's my answer going to be? 4. Right? Okay, now the negatives would cancel out. Okay, now is 4 an issue for the denominator in the original problem? Yes. Okay, like the two answers I cannot have here because it would make my denominator 0 would be positive 4 and positive 3. When we did all that work there, we ended up with 4. So if I would have plugged that in my denominator, that causes us to divide by 0. That's not good. So actually for my answer for this question, this would be no solution. So you just got to check real quick before you write your answer down. Just make sure it doesn't make a denominator in the original problem 0. Is anybody having a question? Okay. Now, the next two questions, I'm just going to show you like a little trick, okay? So, do you see in these guys, you have some kind of like the denominators are kind of written in a different format than you're used to seeing. I have a number minus x. If we were to write that, either any of those in standard form, we'd have like negative x plus 4, or we'd have negative x plus 3 for the other one. But two of them are really similar. So I just want to show you this little tiny trick that you can use. All right, so do you see how this is subtraction in between here? I'm going to change this to a plus sign. Let me make it so I can actually see it because I can't see it. Okay, so I'm going to change that to a plus sign. What I'm going to do to allow me to do that is I'm going to divide just the denominator. You don't do it to the top and the bottom, just do it to one part of the fraction. So I'm just going to do it to the bottom. When I pull that negative 1 out there, that's going to change this sign to a plus. Also, when I do that, it's going to change the sign of each of those terms. So I'm going to write the x first. When I take a negative from a negative x, that would actually make it positive x. And if I take a negative from a positive 4, that would actually make it x minus 4. Does that make sense? Like I'm literally changing the sign, but what allows me to do that is I changed that to a plus in between those two fractions. I'm factoring a negative out of both terms in the denominator. Completely legal to do that. And then you guys are going to see if I do that little trick, the denominator over here, factored form, is going to be x minus 4 times x plus 3. And then it turns very similar into a couple of the questions we were just doing. So this guy then would need the x minus 4. And after I manipulated that, this would need the x plus 3. And then it's super similar to the problems that we were doing on the front. Does that make sense? I'm not trying to be, okay, I'm not trying to confuse anybody. All right, so I'm going to cross this out. Now, on this guy, I'm going to distribute a 2. So we'd have 2x minus 8. On this guy, we would distribute this, since I changed it to a plus, just distribute that as a positive 3. So it'd be 3x plus 9. The other side had the common denominator, so we didn't have to manipulate that. So I'm going to end up with, let's see, 5x plus 1 equals 2x minus 2. Now, totally up to you. I'm going to keep my variable positive if I can, so I'm going to subtract 2x, and I'm actually going to subtract 1 in the same step. So I'm going to get 3x. And then negative 3, x is negative 1. And that's not going to cause you a problem at all. Okay, let me practice that factoring out a negative with you guys one more time over here. Okay, so the reason I'm doing this, I want my x to be positive. So if your x is being subtracted, they're trying to get you to do this. So what I'm going to do this on two different terms. I'm going to take a little negative out in front. Okay, when I do that, here's what I'm going to do for this. If it's not in front of something else, I can't change the sign in between. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make the top of that negative 7. I'm literally just going to change the sign of everything in that fraction by doing that. So I'm pulling that negative, I'm just putting it with the top. Okay, the bottom then, that x would become positive, that 3 would become negative. So it'd be x minus 3. All right, the other side, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to take a little negative 1 to switch the signs of both of those terms. just put it with the top of the fraction if you don't have adding or subtracting between. If you had adding or subtracting between, we would change the sign. If not, just put it on the top of the fraction, and then this becomes x minus 4. So you could pull it out in front also, like if you want to pull it out in front, you could do that, or you could put it on the top, either way. I'm just putting it on the top because that's going to make it easier to work with, but I'm pulling a negative either out in front, or you can just put it on top. It's up to you. Either way, if you want to flip those signs around, you got to introduce a negative into that fraction. So it can either be out in front, and that's what I did here because I changed the sign in the middle. On this, I don't have anything, I'm not adding this to something or whatever, so I just put it with the top. Or you could put it out in front, but I'm just going to put it with the top to make it easier to work with. Okay, now, this guy's going to be a little harder than the last couple questions that we did, because to create a common denominator here, I'm going to need x minus 3, top and bottom here. I'm going to need an x minus 4, top and bottom here. This will be a lot easier to work with than if you have an x that's negative. Now, I also need a 2. Do you guys see how this one has a denominator of 2? So I'm going to need a 2 for both of these. Okay, now the one in the middle is the trickiest because you're going to need, sorry, I didn't even leave enough space. I'm going to multiply top and bottom here, x minus 4, x minus 3. Sorry, I did not write that. On the top, though, I'm just going to multiply that by 1, so it's just going to be that. We're going to multiply it out here in a second. Okay, all my denominators, 2 times x minus 4 and multiplied by x minus 3, so I'm going to cross it out. All right, now, let me write this for you. You have 2 numbers on this first one. You have a 2 and you have a negative 7 here, because we took that negative out. So I'm going to do negative 14 times x minus 4. Okay, now in between here, you're going to have to do a FOIL. We have an x minus 4, x minus 3. And then on this side, on the other side of the equal sign, you have a negative 3 and a 2, all being multiplied by this x minus 3. I'm just going to multiply those numbers. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. Okay, so this guy's a little more complicated than some of the other ones we've been working with. So let me distribute this real quick. This will be negative 14x. Now, don't forget, when you do a negative times a negative, that actually makes a positive. So let's see, that'd be plus, I think that's 56. Okay, I'm going to cheat and just do this real quick for you. So that, if you multiply that out with like a FOIL or a box, should get x squared. We'll get minus 4x minus 3x. So in the middle, it'd be minus 7x. And then on the end, we're going to get 12. On the other side here, we're going to multiply by negative 6. So we're going to get negative 6x. Now, negative 6 times negative 3 ends up being positive 18. So be careful with that. Negative times a negative is going to make a positive. Okay, I think we're going to have a quadratic, so I'm just going to do my best to put everything together here. This one's kind of a long problem. All right, I only have an x squared here, just one of them. Negative 14 and negative 7 would be negative 21 x's. I have a 56 and a 12, so 56 and 12 is going to be 68. And then on this other side, I had negative 6x and 18. So if you end up with a quadratic, which we're going to have here, we want to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to add 6x. And I'm just going to subtract the 18, just right in the same step. And I promise if you get a quadratic, it'll be factorable. And let's see. I'm just going to cross off this next problem because we're not going to have enough space. Okay, so I got x squared, let's see. 21 minus, or sorry, negative 21 plus 6 would be negative 15x. And 68 minus 18 would be 50. Can you guys think of 2 numbers? If you multiplied them, you would get 50 positive. But if you added them, you'd get negative 15. Yes, negative 5, negative 10. So that problem ended up being way longer than I thought it was. So you get 5 and 10 as your actual answers. And neither of those would cause you a problem in the denominator. Numbers that would cause me a problem in the denominator would be 3 and 4. So both of those answers work. I'm just going to skip this problem. Okay. Now, is anybody having a question so far? That was way harder than I thought it was. Okay, let me look at these two at the bottom. Okay, two ways to solve this. It's up to you. If you want to create a common denominator, you can do that, or you can actually just cross multiply. I'm just going to create a common denominator because I feel like that's what I've been doing all day today. So this guy would need x plus 4 top and bottom, and this guy would need an x. If I do that, I'm just going to cross this out. What you want to do here on the top, you'd have to distribute an x. This is going to be a quadratic, so I know a little practice with quadratics here today. So you got x squared plus 2x. On the other side, you would have 3x plus 12. All right, if we're going to end up with a quadratic, which is what we have here, you want to set it equal to 0, but you want to set so your x squared term is positive. So I'm going to leave the x squared plus 2x where it's at. I'm going to move the 3x and move the 12. So to move both of them, we're going to have to subtract both because they're both positive to the other side. So I got x squared minus x minus 12. And then tell me two numbers, when you multiply them, you get negative 12, but if you'd add them, you'd get negative 1. Say that one more time. That's not going to give me negative 1. I got negative 4, positive 3. That'll work. Negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. Negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1. Okay, now, here are my two answers. 4, negative 3. Are either one of those a problem? No. Okay, so this is x plus 4, so negative 4 would have been a problem, but my actual answer there should be positive 4, so that's okay. Both of those are going to work. All right, let me have you guys try one more. This one will actually, I think, be a little bit easier. If I create a common denominator here, this guy'd need an x minus 5, this guy'd need an x minus 8. Or if you want to just do a normal proportion and cross multiply, that'll be exactly the same thing I'm going to do. Okay, foil or box, whatever your preference is. I'm going to cheat and write this because I'm talking too long today. If you take x minus 8 times x plus 4, should be x squared. You'd get minus 8x, but plus 4x, so that would be minus 4x. And negative 8 times 4 is negative 32. On the other side, x times x give you x squared. You'd have plus 10x, but then minus 5x, so it'd be plus 5x. And 10 times negative 5 is negative 50. Now, the super nice part about this question, this is not going to be quadratic because the x squareds are going to cancel out, right, on both sides. So you're going to get negative 4x minus 32 and 5x minus 50. Now, completely up to you. If it's me, I like to try to keep my variable positive. So I'm going to add 4x to where I put that on the right side. And I'm just going to add 50 in the same step, just to save some space. Now, if you do negative 32 and you add 50 to that, you're going to get 18. If you take 5x and 4x, you're going to get 9x. So x is going to end up being 2. And as long as I didn't have a 5 or an 8 as my answer, then we should be in good shape. Is anybody having a question?